Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's CAARSEA talk. Tonight, we will be speaking with our special guest, Rochelle Culbreath, who is a candidate running for the Pennsylvania House District number 54. So before we start, I'd like to give you a little background about our program. We have been doing this Let's Talk series actually since February, and we've covered a number of different issues relevant to the upcoming elections. For this series, we are focusing on the new House District 54 and the two Democratic candidates that are running for that race. Today, we'll be speaking with Rochelle Culbreath, and next week, we'll be speaking with our guest candidate, Greg Scott. I'm going to give a few more minutes for the rest of our guests to join us. Please know that this program is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, you are welcome to drop off at this time. Okay, as I mentioned, next week we will be speaking with Judge Greg Scott. I would like to take a moment and start with this quote from Martin Luther King. And the quote says, "Give us the ballot and we shall no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot and we will, by the power of our vote, write the laws on the statute books of the southern states and bring to an end the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence. Give us the ballot and we will fill our legislative halls with men of goodwill. Give us the ballot and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will do justly and have mercy." So I think that's a great background for our talk tonight around the importance of local elections, around the importance of voting, and around how it can really create a change in our local environment. There are a few members joining us tonight who may not be familiar with our group CAARSEA, the Colonial Area Anti-Racism and Social Equity Alliance. So here is our vision and a little bit more about our organization. CAARSEA is a fairly new group. We boast over 1,000 members. We are really focused on the colonial area. And our mission is really to overcome racial injustice. We'd like for our community to be one where diversity is welcomed, encouraged, celebrated, and valued. As you all know, in joining this call today, our elected officials determine how and where our tax dollars are spent. They make and support policies that impact housing affordability, the cost and quality of education, and the general safety and stability of our communities. When our community is not doing well in those areas, it disproportionately affects our minority communities, and we all suffer. We all suffer when homelessness is high, if our children aren't taught and don't see diversity among their teachers, if development makes our communities unaffordable. So within our organization, we work with our officials in the school district, the police, and our elected officials. And we work with these groups to act around issues of discrimination, racism, and social inequity in our community. We do this by raising awareness of the issues, modeling and facilitating courageous conversations, and providing resources such as this event for community learning and engagement. In one of our early Let's Talk series, we spoke about redistricting and about the fact that the new Pennsylvania maps were being redrawn around the districts that would be covered in the Pennsylvania State Legislature. Our conversation here tonight is around the new district that was created, District 54, and that covers Norristown Borough, Plymouth Meeting, and Conshohocken. White Marsh Township, which previously was included in our district, Lower Merion and Narberth make up their own district, and that is the 148th Legislative District. What's particularly unique about District 54 is that when this new district was created, there was no sitting incumbent. There was no person living in the area of Plymouth, Conshohocken, and Norristown who was a current elected official. And so without having a current incumbent, it's an open race. What's also unique about our district is that there's a high degree of diversity. 50% of the population are non-white. And so this really presents a unique and valuable opportunity to make sure that the voices of all of our community members are heard. We're fortunate to have 2 African-American candidates running for this race. However, it's important to us at Carseat to look at the issues and where do the candidates stand on the issues and what are their plans for our local community. In tonight's forum, we will focus on those issues and how the candidates plan to address them. I have prepared questions that I will be directing to Rochelle for the first 20 minutes of our talk. Following that, I will open the floor to the audience for your question and answer. Please submit your question and answers in the chat, and then I will read them to the guests. Okay, that's a little bit of background. So at this point, I would like to introduce Rochelle Culbreath. Rochelle presents herself as a fresh new voice for the district, for a new district. She's a lifelong member of the community, a dedicated public servant. Rochelle is ready to advocate for our small businesses and schools, fight for good jobs and living wages, and deliver the essential services our community needs. She has over 20 years experience crafting legislation and will be ready to fight for the community on day one. I am going to stop sharing at this point, and I would like to welcome Rochelle Culbreath.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you for creating this Let's Talk series. I think it's very valuable. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. And I do want to point out to everyone that in our redistricting talk that we had, following the redistricting talk, we had another talk around running for local elections because it was very important for us that the community know that this new 54th district was being created, and that if there were those that they knew that were committed public servants looking to take on the task to represent the community in Harrisburg and represent the needs of the entire community, particularly around the issues of diversity and equity, that it was a very short time period for folks to throw their hat in the ring, get signatures, and officially announce their candidacy. And the Carseat group greatly appreciates, Rochelle, your pulse on the community and your awareness of our group, because at the end of that meeting, when we actually spoke with our guest mayor, Yaniv Aronson, Conshohocken Borough Mayor, at the end of that meeting, when we made the call for anyone that was interested in running for election or knew of someone that would be a good candidate, you already had your eye on it. And you said, I'm someone that's ready to throw my hat in the ring. And if anyone has any questions, whatever your issues or needs are, please reach out. And so that really helped to bring this idea to the forefront for us of getting the community in front of the candidates and the candidates in front of the community. So thank you for just being on the pulse of the various groups, a new group like ours in the community, and making yourself readily accessible to answer any questions that we may have.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So let's start with a little background. Could you please tell us a little bit about your background in public service? Where did you start? Let's start there.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you for the invitation, and I appreciate being a part of these Let's Talk series. I'm Rochelle Culbreath. I'm running for the new House seat. It's House seat 54, brand new created seat, as Sonia mentioned. My public service started a long time ago. Started back in the year 2000. I first ran for Norristown Council, and at that time, the Norristown Council looked very different than it does today, and it has been different for the last 20 some years. When I ran for council, I had Republican opponents, and so the lay of the land was a lot different. And I ended up running against the president of council at the time. I had never run for elective office, and I threw my hat in the ring because I had left for college. And when I came back to Norristown, I noticed that the roads weren't paved. I noticed that there were a bunch of pawn shops and check cashing places instead of real stores when that were there when I left. I'm fourth generation Norristonian. I've been here my entire life. I come from a family of service. My grandfather was the second Black police officer. My grandmother was the third Black teacher. She spent 46 years at J.K. Gottwalls Elementary School on Sweet Street, being a kindergarten teacher. And so the only thing I've known about life is to serve people, to serve my community. And I've been working very hard at that since the year 2000. I sat on council for 2 terms, and I was the first actual pregnant council person. So I left after I had a daughter, but I think there was a lot of new things going on council. And my experience on council was unmatched. It has allowed me to go into my job at SEPTA. I've been at SEPTA, the Southeastern, the transit agencies, the 6th largest transit agency in the United States. And I'm the manager of legislative affairs there for the state. So that's what takes me to Harrisburg all the time. And that's why I'm very familiar with Harrisburg's process, and specifically with the legislative process. I've sat on about 20 boards and commissions throughout the time of my public life. Salvation Army, I created a CDC. I've sat on Workforce Investment Board for Montgomery County for over a decade. That's creating employable people, which is part of my passion and mission. I also sat on the creation of the comprehensive plan for Montgomery County for 2024. And Your Way Home, I sit on the Your Way Home board currently, but just recently appointed. If you remember, the governor came here about 2 months ago to celebrate the work that SEPTA and we are doing on Your Way Home, as well as SEPTA with our vulnerable population and the homeless.
So we're going to get to that, because there is a lot in your background. So thank you very much for helping us understand how you got started in public service, and how the type of work that you do today with legislative affairs for SEPTA. Can you tell us what are 2 results that you are particularly proud of in your public service career?
Sure, 2 results. The 2 things that I think stand out the most. The first thing I think I'm most proud of is when I was on council in about the year 2004, Norristown became almost insolvent. We were in the process of filing for something called Act 47, which is bankruptcy, or it's bankruptcy for a municipality. And we thought about it. My colleagues on council thought about it very strongly, and we felt very strongly about what that could do to our community. And there's communities that have done that, and they have not been able to remove that eyesore. They've not been able to recover after filing for bankruptcy and Act 47 with the municipality. So we wanted to do everything possible that we could to fiscally restore the health of the municipality of Norristown. And at the time, it was still a borough. And what we did was we went to the governor, who gave us a significant amount of money to help us to get out of bankruptcy and to restore the fiscal health of the municipality. We also created a number of revenue sources that still run today. Very unique revenue sources, very creative revenue sources. There is creativity in local government. Trust me, we did it, and it restored the health of our community. And Norristown did not file for Act 47. We were given a receiver, Joe Vignola, from the governor, and he helped us to restructure our finances. And we took the municipality out of the red into the black.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say I'm most proud of would have to be the Senior Ride Free program at SEPTA. So the Senior Ride Free program at SEPTA was running where you had the ability to go there. If you turned 65, you could go to, you could get your Senior Ride Free card from SEPTA. And I was very instrumental in developing that program within the legislative district offices of all of our state reps. So now you can go to your local state representative's office in your community to get your Senior Ride Free card, to ride free on SEPTA, any bus, trolley, subway, regional rail, high speed line, everything. And why that's so important to me is seniors have access to get that card without coming all the way downtown. So it runs in all 5 counties. It runs all the way up to Bethlehem. So it runs in both sides of the house are all running the program. So that's how I'm always engaged with across the aisle with both Democrats and Republicans.
Thank you. Those are definitely 2 accomplishments to be proud of. You know, keeping our districts in the black to make sure that, you know, we have the money and resources to support our citizens, and then also to increase access to the most vulnerable populations. So thank you. As we're on that topic, I do want to pull on the thread that you shared around creative new revenue sources.
Yeah.
What are some, can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, there were a couple things. A lot of it had to do with our rental units. Norristown had 8,900 rental units at the time. So in the attempt to manage those,
one of the most important.
Sorry, you've got a good background. Thank you.
In an attempt to manage all of those rental units, as well as to gain funding from just having that many rental units, we created sources where landlords had to be accountable. They had to have an office within the municipality, and those offices, all of their any landlord dealings with the municipality was had a cost to it. You had to have a you had to engage the municipality in order to be a landlord in the municipality. And what that did was it created not only transparency, but it created the ability for us to manage and keep landlords accountable and responsible to the people that they were renting to. With 8,900, you got to have some sort of accountability around it. Then there was also one other revenue source that sometimes I hate to mention this because of how it sounds, but we created something called the boot. So, you know, when you go to a town and you park and you don't pay your parking ticket, well, anyone in the municipality that had tickets over $3,000, if you didn't pay your ticket and you actually were, your meter was over, you would get a boot put on your car. And that boot, you would have to pay your tickets in order to get your car back or take the boot off. So what we did was we went to Philadelphia and we learned how that boot program was running. And when we got there, each one of us learned how to run that program. We purchased our number of boots to start out with. And the program actually created a revenue source of over $700,000 a year. So that one program actually got us out of the debt we were in. We had over $1 million worth of bills that were in the drawer that we didn't know about. So I'm really proud of, don't want to say proud of the boot program because I know that it doesn't sound very good, but it is a revenue source. Sometimes things are necessary.
Great, thank you. So I would like to continue along those lines with funding, but talk about school funding. What should our community be paying attention to in regards to the issue of fair and equitable funding?
Yeah, so this district well, Colonial and Norristown are the two school districts within the 54th, and they have very diverse needs. So out of the two school districts, they're apples and oranges, that you can't really look at them the same. But I think what you can look at is equity. And I think that, in fair funding, the ability to always depend on taxes to fund the school district when you don't have equity in tax collection and you don't have equity in how taxes are collected or the amount that's collected. Norristown's taxes are different than Colonial's taxes, so it's very different. So the equity is not going to be there unless we try to create a fair funding formula. But I also think that I'm a huge proponent of dedicated funding, and I think that we need to recreate our fair funding to have dedicated funding for specific needs within our school districts. I also think that, and I'm not anti-charter. My daughter went to a charter school. I want to be very clear about that. But I do think that charter schools call themselves public schools. So I want them to be accountable and transparent with their budgets, with how they are funded and what they use their funding for. They should just be considered just like public schools, because that's what they present themselves with as.
Thank you. I do have some more information on charter schools to share with the group, and then we'll talk about that a bit more. I want to talk about the dedicated funding for specific needs. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one thing I think we should definitely create a dedicated funding source for is our VOTEC education, the specific things within our VOTEC education. So I'm a huge proponent of our VOTEC school in Plymouth. It is an incredible school, and it has a number of very valuable programs that individuals can get certificates and go out and get gainful employment, very high paying jobs. And I think it's important for us to keep the residents here. If our students, we have so many amazing local colleges that people can go to after they graduate from school. From high school. So I think that's important. But the specific dedicated funding that I'm thinking of particularly is more funding for school counselors to address mental health issues. We've had a number of mental health issues that have been created from COVID and from isolation. But I also think we need more dedicated funding for school nurses. They should be valued, as well as the ability to gain more diverse teachers in both districts, and make sure that we have that. But the specific funding that I'd like to see with the VOTEC and around schools is Norristown School District is entirely free lunch. And I think that any student that receives free lunch should also have access to dedicated funding for the VOTEC school. So if they're going to the VOTEC school and they are taking a mechanics course, they should have access to tools. They can't pay for the $300 toolkit, so they should be getting that given to them through some sort of dedicated funding source. And that same funding source can also operate in period justice. I'm a huge proponent of addressing period poverty. One of the issues I have with period poverty is that it shouldn't even be a thing. I don't even know how in 2022 that's a thing, but it most certainly is. And I have a real issue with truancy and how it's addressed, because truancy is mostly around poverty. So I'd like to create legislation where things that are required or needed for menstrual cycles are available to students that are on free lunch through a dedicated funding source.
Thank you. Personally, those speak near and dear to my heart. My children are in the Colonial School District. My two African-American female children, I have a 4-year-old male that will be entering the school district. And I know of one African-American male administrator in the entire school district, one Asian female teacher. And so the fact that my children and other children, white children, Hispanic children, Asian children, will go through their entire school career in the Colonial School District and never be taught by someone that doesn't look like them just does not seem fair to any of our students, right? It really does not present a realistic image of the world and really doesn't give them experience in dealing with one another. Period poverty is certainly another issue that is very real. And so, you know, it's unfortunate that women have to choose between going to school or staying home because financially, you know, their family can't afford to provide the sanitary products that they need. So, you know, I appreciate that you have an eye on that. It's something that has come to my attention only more recently because of someone I know in the Philadelphia area that is working on that issue as well. Thank you for talking about those specific areas where you would like to see increased funding in our schools. I am going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on from the charter school issue. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to continue on education, but I would like to talk about truancy. So let me do this. Okay. So just quickly about charter school education for the audience, here is a reference PA charter change that I became aware of. This is a group that is out of the school board administrators for the state. And so a number of school boards have come together to form this Pennsylvania Charter Change Group. And what they're looking at is the formula for how charter schools are funded. What I have on the screen to the right is some research that they released just this month in April. And what this research shows is that essentially funding follows the student. So if the student attends a charter school, the funding formula currently for the state provides the same amount of money that it would cost for them to stay in their district. And so that's what you see with the first column of the regular education charter tuition. The biggest disparity, I think, comes when you look at the special education charter tuition rate. Our school districts actually support 95% of the highest need students, of special education students. However, the same amount of funds as is allotted to our school district are allotted to charter schools. And when you look at the reported cost of that special education, it's roughly $4,000. So that's the third column, regular ed rate plus $4,000. And so what this chart is showing is from data from Keystone Center for Charter Change that there's roughly $19,000 in cost beyond what it costs to educate a student for special education services. And in watching this video from Pennsylvania Charter Change, which you all can access as well, the issue is that charter schools are not required to use all of those funds for special education. And so it really begs the question as a taxpayer about the transparency, about the accountability, and about funds that are leaving our district. And you know, I think we need more attention to that by our state legislators to make sure that the students in the public school have the resources that they need, and that the students in the charter schools are getting the services for, you know, comparable to the funds that are being provided. So that's just a point that I wanted to make on that. I think, Rochelle, I'm going to pause for a moment and ask if you have anything to add around how we can be successful in supporting the various needs of students, both in the public and charter schools in our area.
So how can we support our youth? Is
Yeah.
that what the question is? So
Yep.
yeah,
How can
so
we support our youth? Correct.
yeah, so I used the data from the Pennsylvania charter change for my platform to create my platform, and so I'm glad that that this is a question because it's really important, and I think that because of the diversity of Norristown and Colonial, right, I think you have to be very specific about how we address these issues, and I think that when I was I wasn't on council. Years after I was off council, I became the chair of something called the Weed and Seed Committee. Norristown Weed and Seed was a created organization out of about $30,000 that was left over in a budget from the Department of Justice. And we worked very closely with Rob Listenby and other experts in the fields of truancy as well as antisocial youth behavior. And what we found was that the majority of the issues that happen with our youth and having access to services and acting out antisocial youth behavior, as well as not performing well in school and not being inside after school doing their homework or having dinner with their families. All those things are affected by what happens in the home. So I really believe in a strong constituent service platform. And because I've been working in constituent services for the last 20 some years of my life, constituent services is going to be paramount in my legislative district office. And I think that it has to be a collaboration between after school programs that are consistent, has to be a collaboration between the community centers. They have to be consistent. We have to have very strong parents that are engaged and involved in their students' lives, and that they understand the issues, and that we keep them out of harm's way, keep them engaged in school, and help them to be better learners and performers and critical thinkers.
Great, thank you. Any ideas on how we can get the money back into our schools or get more accountability for the charter schools?
Yeah, I think, I think one of the issues is finding out and really surveying, what the parents are saying, the reasons why their children are going there. And what are those issues that parents are facing, and also find out how we can get charter schools to make presentations to school districts to share with all of us what they're using their funding for. And there was one other thing. I think that charter school boards are not representative of the community the same way that public school boards are. So I think that might also be beneficial if it wasn't just a private board on a charter school. If you had representation of the community, I think there would be more understanding of how important it is to make sure these dollars are being spent fiscally responsibly. That's one thing I would do.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next chart I have up is around racial disparities and suspensions. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. So this is a chart that was developed by Liza Maris, the secretary for the NAACP of Cheltenham, which covers Plymouth meeting. And one of the issues in our school district is around excessive discipline for African American students. This data, which is from a number of sources cited at the bottom, is from school self-reporting. And what this shows in the red bar is the percent of out-of-school suspensions that were given to Black students. And in Plymouth, you see that there were 236 suspensions. And the percent of those that were African American students were over 25, roughly 30%, compared to non-white students. And so, 25 to 30% is a number that's pretty shocking when you think of the percentage of African Americans that are in the school. And that's what the blue line shows. It shows roughly 13% population of African Americans, specifically in the Colonial School District. And this data is real data from the school, students that were suspended. And there's anecdotal data from talking to parents as well around the high rate of discipline and the excessive discipline that our African American students feel. It is 5 times more than that of a white student. And so once again, a concern for members of our community is around how can we stop the school to prison pipeline? How can we address this excessive discipline that happens such that our students are not feel engaged, so they feel engaged in school, so that they are able to bring their best selves to school. And so they do not go quickly from a suspension to a police intervention, to more destructive behavior and are just thrown away. So I know you mentioned that a lot of the ways that we can improve our youth outcomes is through work in the home and engaging with our constituents. But what can we do in terms of in our school buildings such that our students are engaged and do not feel targeted and are not excessively disciplined, and there isn't a high police presence in our schools?
Yeah, so my work on the Weed and Seed program, we had a number of activities around disproportionate minority contact. So disproportionate minority contact is just more contact with minorities engaging with police and law enforcement. So one of the ways that you address disproportionate minority contact and the amount of suspensions is you have to create a culture of engagement. You have to create a culture where diversity and inclusion is not only understood, but it is practiced. And you have to do that with regards to creating authentic programming and making sure that police and students have a relationship. And I'm very strong. I believe very strongly in hubs, and I believe very strongly in community schools. I'm very engaged in the community schools in Philadelphia. And what those community schools have is they have all of the services that you see throughout the community inside each one of the schools. So when the mayor created it, you can go into any school, and not only do your children go to school there, but you can fill out a form for if you need to get a passport, if you need to, anything that you need access to with regards to constituent services is also there for a parent or for a student. Information on after school programs, all those things are in community schools. I'm a huge advocate of them. I believe that they create a culture around understanding the community, because what the issues are in the community are the issues that filter into the school during the school day. So really getting a clear understanding of culturally where people are and creating community police relations that are strong and that are authentic. And doing that by, when I was on Weed and Seed, we had this program where it was a role-playing program. The police acted like they were the kids and the kids acted like they were the police. And it was astonishing to see the different roles and how people thought they should be acting when they became the other role. And it really showed me that we really have to build relationships with our police departments, and we really have to create training programs with our youth that work both together collaboratively.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got to echo that. CAARSEA has taken on the role of filling the gap in our community. We've really built our relationships with our local police officers, Plymouth Township Police Chief in particular. And so when students and families are facing a situation in the school district, it's really important to have a trusted partner to be able to engage with them, because we do know that, some communities do not feel the police are safe and trusted and have their best interest at heart. So it's important to have elected officials that believe in bridging that gap and trying to bring our community members together.
Yeah, and I think just to add that we have a police department that that really does that. I think both Colonial Plymouth Police as well as Norristown Police are very engaged with the youth because I've seen it firsthand myself personally in both police departments. So I have, you know, another day some really great stories around that. So they really do engage.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got two more questions, guys, and then I will open it up. So right here, we're talking, we know that our Pennsylvania legislative is a Republican led. And so, you know, we're really looking for a Democratic candidate that is going to look out for the needs of the broader community, particularly those that have been historically disenfranchised, particularly those that are under attack. The Southern Poverty Law Center created a hate map, and this is a map of active hate groups in the country. Pennsylvania has 30 active groups. Only a handful of states have more, and those states being California with 72, Florida with 68, Texas with 54. So hate crimes are real. Hate groups still continue to exist. How do you suggest we give attention and resources to protect threatened communities and to promptly and thoroughly investigate and prosecute hate crimes? And I just want to say that, you know, even in our own community, we have members that have experienced some aggressive behavior from their Black Lives Matter signs or other signs of support for underrepresented communities. They have had some hostile interactions with community neighbors around that. And so this issue is very important to us. So how do you suggest that we give attention, resources, and investigate these issues?
Yeah. So what I would suggest that, or what I would do initially is first, I think the issue with hate crimes is make it safe to report them. I think that people are fearful of the repercussions of reporting them. And I think that happens a lot of times because a lot of the hate crimes happen in underserved communities and immigrant communities who are already scared of the police, already don't feel comfortable in engaging with law enforcement. So I think one of those things is to create it and make it safe to report hate crimes. The other thing I would do as a legislator is support the 4 bills that are currently in the legislature. But I do want to make note that there are 42 anti-government groups also, not only just hate groups that exist in the Commonwealth. So the big issue is going to be supporting those 4 bills and making sure that I support the idea of having police training. The training bill in the hate crimes package, we need more support for victims, and we need to make it clear and to law enforcement that if you do make an arrest in a stop or in something that is an assault, maybe there is an assault, you walk up to and a hate crime has taken place and someone's arrested, but they are arrested for the assault, but they're not arrested for the big picture of the hate crime that was surrounding this person that was assaulted. So the first part gets reported, but the second part doesn't get reported. So we have inaccurate numbers, inaccurate information on what actually happened or led to that assault. It was a hate crime. And so I think that if we raise awareness around the 4 bills, get those passed, try to make reporting less scary and more safe, and create stronger training programs within the police department to report the hate crime with the assault, the hate crime with the attack or whatever happened.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for the member that was really aggressively challenged, you know, on her home property in our community because of her support for Black Lives Matter, you know, there was a fear of reporting, you know, and once it was reported, it didn't feel like it was taken seriously. And so she had to report over and over again. And so that's why this issue is so important to us, is because although you don't see a hate group listed with their home in Conshohocken or Plymouth meeting, there are no borders. So if this group exists in Philadelphia, they can drive to Norristown, Conshohocken, if they exist in any other part of the state. And so it's very important for a state legislator to have this issue on their radar. And that's just one, one of the issues that happen in our community. Okay, it is 8:45. I would like now to open the floor to some questions. I was reviewing the chat and I was able to pull out a couple questions that were in there. I do have team members that are monitoring all sources, and so they'll be feeding me some questions as well. So please type your questions in the chat. While I wait for some more questions to come through, I did want to ask my last question, which is around homelessness. CAARSEA participates once a month. We actually set up a station at Norristown train station where we provide basic necessities to the community. We have been doing this for over a year. It's one of our longest standing programs. The community knows that we're out there the third Saturday of the month. They're looking for us. It's clothing, it's food, their toothbrushes. We're out there in the cold months, the warm months. And so, what we've found is that there really needs to be a more coordinated effort to service our houseless population, our community members, with respect to safety, with respect to their mental and physical health, and really try to get them on a path to housing. What we're doing is it's filling a gap, it's putting a Band-Aid on the situation, but really we'd like to increase affordability in our area, and we would like to get people that don't have homes into homes. So if you could speak about what your plans or ideas are to that end.
Yeah, so this issue is very close to my heart because I work very closely in it every single day. And I sit on the board called Your Way Home, which is the initial homeless organization that one that becomes homeless dials into. It is 211. And that organization receives an individual and takes an intake and makes a determination of whether or not they can help that person and where they can direct them for resources. But I also want to make sure I have something called the Montgomery County Vulnerable Population Task Force. And I created that about 9 months ago. It has 50 consistent stakeholders that meet once a month and discuss this very issue throughout all of the organizations that engage in this work in Montgomery County. We sit down and we have conversations about what we're doing. We don't want to work in a silo. We want to work collaboratively with each other, hear what each other is doing. And particularly because of SEPTA having train stations that you can tell, that's where the homeless are going. They go to the SEPTA stations because it's warm there and they have a roof over their head. But what we want to try to do is get people into housing, like you said, affordable housing, where they can start their lives over or get them first into rehabilitation if they have issues with drugs and alcohol. So what we've been doing is creating this Montgomery County Vulnerable Population Task Force, and it consists of a number of organizations. One of the most proudest collaboration is the Operation Rebound, which consists of Norristown Police, as well as the SEPTA Transit Police, and Gaudensia House, which is the organization that addresses drug addiction and alcohol. And those three organizations, or those three entities, meet and they go around to all of our train stations and they make sure that they engage individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And they ask them on the spot, what do you need? Food, medical attention. What is it that you need to get you into resources? We've just recently added Cabrini students. It was a relationship that I had with Brian Uri, who is the government affairs person at Cabrini. And we created a program with nurse navigators. So we now use first year students in the science and exercise science program to also participate in engaging individuals that are experiencing homelessness. They could administer medical services right away. But when you talk about that's what we're doing on the ground, okay? That's what happens day to day to address the issue of homelessness and vulnerable population. But I think when we talk on a large scale, about how do we address affordable housing and the need for it. I think we need to remind people that after Hurricane Ida, and that was last August, there were 400 individuals that became homeless that were not homeless people living on the streets. They lived in an apartment building where they could afford. And it was about $900 to $1,200 a month, but there was affordable housing. The two only affordable housing properties that we have in our area became, they were flooded, and they are no longer able to be inhabited. So no one can use them anymore. So these people are in hotels still. So that's 400 people that are homeless in Montgomery County. Then after that, you have the regular 300 unhoused individuals that are regularly homeless that we count in our regular PIT count. It's the count that we do every year for HUD, where we count the actual unhoused individuals, unsheltered individuals that are on the streets. And what I'm saying to you is that those individuals, the 300 that are in CHOC, in our coordinated homeless outreach center, they're going to have to go somewhere because that center's closing on July the 1st. So we already have 400 homeless people that were not homeless before. We have 300 homeless inside CHOC that will now have nowhere to go. I have good news about that, though. I'm not sure how much public all of this is, but I do know that they are looking at taking the center from CHOC, which is on the Norristown State Hospital grounds. It will close July 1st. Their release has not been extended, and they're trying to create a relationship with a location in Lower Providence, and that will house the homeless population there. And most recently, Senator Moose announced that there were some RCAP funding that was dedicated to support this new center to support the homeless. So it is a huge issue. It's not going away. As you can see, when you say 400 and then add 3, that's 700 people that, we need to really treat them, accept that we treat them as human beings. And we go to them and we ask them, what services do you need? And how can you get there? Working with access. We work with all 50 stakeholders throughout Montgomery County to address this issue. And it's been very, very beneficial to making sure that individuals get care.
Great, thank you. So our last question before we wrap up, I mentioned before that we are a Republican-led legislature. So how do you as a Democratic candidate expect to have an influence and work across the aisle in order to get your ideas to the floor and to us as the public?
Yeah, so that's very important to be able to work across the aisle. And I think that one of the benefits that I have in being able to jump right in and start on day one with my legislative experience is that I have been working in Harrisburg already. I have been creating legislation and working with both Democrats and Republicans on transportation legislation and with my senior ride free program, but most particularly with public transit, explaining to Republicans in rural areas how important public transit is in cities like Philadelphia or places like Norristown and Plymouth is hard. It's no easy task. Getting them to buy into dedicated funding. I think that when I was involved in creating legislation for dedicated funding, Act 89, to address issues with public transit, that money went to infrastructure. That money went to specific needs with our buildings and bridges. All of those things that SEPTA own that we are definitely still deficient in being able to address all those issues. So going to our Republican legislature as well as our Democratic legislature and sharing all of the needs of the community and how important public transit is in urban areas. And when you are a Republican in an area that does not have public transit, being able to convince them is difficult. And I think one of the ways that I found that was that I'll use when I get to Harrisburg is to uniquely share with them how public transit does relate to rural areas. And one of the things that I think was always very helpful is SEPTA created a wind farm in Franklin County, which has no public transit, and those are the Republicans that would not normally understand, how they can impact public transit. And that wind farm that was created actually works to power the vehicles here throughout the 5-county area where SEPTA has service. So when they can relate to that and they can drive by that wind farm every day and they can say, oh, that's powering something all the way in Philadelphia, that's getting someone to work, it's taking someone to the doctors, that's getting a senior to ride free on all of those things. It matters to them and they can relate to that.
Great, thank you so much. So I would like to cover a few things before we wrap up. There are very important dates for this upcoming primary. May 2nd, just in a few days, is the last day to register to vote. May 10th is your last day to apply for a mail-in or absentee ballot. And then May 17th is election day, but please note, primary election day, but please note that if you do choose to do a mail-in or absentee ballot, that must be received by 8 p.m. that day by your county election office. So you may choose to do a drop box as opposed to traditional postal mail to make sure that your vote is in on time. If you're looking for more ways to connect with Rochelle, her website is here. I also found from her public site that she has a new campaign office that is open. And then there are other upcoming events that you can learn about where you can speak with her, ask her more of the questions that you may have. Tomorrow is another event that I would like to promote, and this event is hosted by Good Morning Conchi, Teresa Brown Paris's program, and this is with both candidates, and Mayor Yaniv Aronson from Conshohocken Borough Mayor will be hosting that candidate chat. So please make sure to tune in for that event or tell your friends and neighbors to tune in. We only have a short amount of time and there are a number of issues and these are pretty complex issues. So let's take any opportunity that we can to hear what these candidates have to say and ask them our questions and share our concerns. Next week, we will be meeting same place, new registration, also virtual, 8 p.m. with Judge Greg Scott. If you would like to continue to engage with CAARSEA, we do have a number of ways for you to help out in the community, as I mentioned, in our schools, with our local police, with our elected officials, with the houseless population. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, or by mail at caarseat@gmail.com. And that concludes our program for this evening. And I thank you so much for joining us. Rochelle, I will give you a few seconds to share about any of your upcoming live events where folks can see you in person and ask any questions of you.
Yeah, I have a town hall that takes place this Thursday. It is a hybrid event, so it's in person as well as virtual. And that I'm going to be doing that live from my campaign office. I also have a community conversation in the Latino and Hispanic community on Saturday. And I've been spending a lot of time with that population. And I think that's it. I also have a fundraiser on Friday that is being given by a lot of local people from Conshohocken.
Great, thank you. Everyone, thank you so much for taking this time with us this evening. It is greatly appreciated. Rochelle, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for stepping up to the plate to represent our district in this upcoming election. Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.